Now, here in Europe, we've spent much of the past year in the grip of an energy crisis. Households across the continent have been encouraged to save on electricity this winter. But in Britain, that's just been taken a step further. Families are now being paid to cut their energy usage.
Alexa, kitchen lights off.
It's 5 p.m. in this English home, an ideal time to switch off as many lights and appliances as possible.
I'm going to save some money on my energy bill, so I'll get a credit back on my Octopus bill. But the main thing is to try and help the national grid so we don't have to turn on any coal-powered fire stations today. I think it's really important that as consumers, we don't just flick switches on, we prepare to turn them off as well.
Sarah's participation helps ensure that demand for electricity doesn't exceed supply. Great Britain's energy companies warn that blackouts are possible, especially if Russia cuts fuel supplies to Europe. Against the backdrop of rising prices for food and services, this would make things even more difficult for families like hers. That's why Sarah and her children are happy to cooperate.
You might not be using those things at the time, and sometimes you leave them on, and you might not be using them, and you could save more money.
After 5, their faces remain lit by battery-powered devices, while Mom lights a candle downstairs.
Well, let's discuss the situation in the UK further with Kai Neufeld. He's head of forecasting at the Centre for Economics and Business Research in London. Thanks a lot for joining us on the programme, Kai. We see people being paid to use less energy in the UK. It seems pretty extreme. How serious is the energy situation over there?
Well, this is more of a precautionary measure than really an emergency. So what National Grid, the grid operator here in Great Britain, is trying to do is balance the supply and demand for energy. And it is judged that at the moment we have a situation where there's very little wind energy. It's very cold, so people use a lot of energy, and they judge that it's a good idea to pay people a bit of money to use less energy, but in a more urgent emergency situation, there would be coal power plants as well on standby. So it's not really a risk of blackout, it's more a precautionary measure.
People seem very grateful to get this money, actually, for turning off their kettles and their lights after 5 p.m. But that's because there are various other challenges facing Brits at the moment, particularly financially, aren't there?
Yeah, certainly. The financial situation for households in the UK is quite dire. As everywhere in Europe and the Western world, we have very high inflation, even though it has ticked down for the past 2 months, but it's still above 10%. That inflation is really felt by people in the weekly shop. It's food price inflation, energy prices, as we spoke about, that are really impacting the disposable income that people have. On top of that, you also have interest rates going up. And in the UK, we have 2 million households that will roll over their mortgage contract this year, and they will find that they will have to pay much higher interest payments going forward. So there's really a squeeze on households at the moment.
And as for businesses, there was data published on Tuesday that showed a drop in business activity in the UK this month. That actually compares with a rise that's been seen in the Eurozone. Is the UK, or is there a feeling in the UK that it is struggling a little bit more than its neighbours over in Europe?
Yeah, I think for the past months, it's always been a little bit neck on neck. We've seen a little bit of a recovery towards the end of last year, both in the Eurozone and in the UK. Now, this morning's figures, as you said, show that the UK has fallen back in January, especially the services sector underperforming. So this does contrast. So it's been a little bit of a mixed bag in terms of economic news. We had consumer confidence ticking up from a low base, but it is a little bit too early to tell whether the UK will be able to turn the corner, whether the UK will be able to escape recession. I think our base case scenario, our kind of central forecast for the UK economy is that it still will enter recession in the first half of 2023.
OK, Kai Neufeld from the Centre for Economics and Business Research. Thank you very much for joining us on DW Business.